Welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy intense family dramas with unexpected twists, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Trust me, you won't believe how this one unfolds. The night before our wedding, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about forever. Forever was a word I had never taken seriously until I met Elena. She walked into my life like a hurricane wrapped in silk, all confidence and warmth and laughter that made strangers turn their heads. We met at a coffee shop, of all places. I was spilling espresso on my shirt, and she handed me a napkin with her phone number written on it. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of late-night conversations, Sunday brunches, fights about nothing, and makeups that felt like winning the lottery. I thought I knew her. I thought she knew me. I thought we were building something unbreakable. But the night before our wedding, everything changed. She came into the bedroom around 11 o'clock. I was half asleep, dreaming about the beachside ceremony we had planned for the next afternoon. The room was dark except for the glow of the city lights filtering through the curtains. I remember the soft sound of her footsteps on the hardwood floor. I remember the way she cleared her throat, that nervous little sound she always made before saying something difficult. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, and saw her standing there holding a thick stack of papers. "What's that?" I asked, my voice still thick with sleep. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, biting her lower lip, her eyes darting between me and the documents in her hands. Elena was usually so confident. She could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with 10 new friends. She could negotiate with anyone, charm anyone, handle any situation with grace and poise. But in that moment, she looked like a child caught sneaking cookies before dinner. "Elena," I said again, more alert now. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath and walked over to the bed. She sat down next to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume, that vanilla and sandalwood scent that had become my favorite smell in the world. But instead of curling up against me like she usually did, she kept a few inches of space between us. That distance felt like a warning. "Marcus," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I need you to sign something." I looked at the papers in her hands. Even in the dim light, I could make out the heading at the top of the first page. Prenuptial Agreement. My stomach dropped. I had heard about these things, of course. Prenups were standard for wealthy people, for celebrities and heirs and business moguls who needed to protect their empires. But I wasn't any of those things. I was just Marcus, a high school history teacher, a guy who drove a 10-year-old Honda and wore suits from discount stores. Why would Elena, a woman from a wealthy family who had never wanted for anything in her life, need a prenup with me? "Just protecting my family," she said, as if reading my thoughts. Her voice was soft, almost apologetic, but there was something underneath it. Something hard. Something that sounded like doubt. I stared at her. "Protecting your family from what?" "From me." She shook her head quickly, too quickly. No, that's not what I meant. It's just, my parents think it's a good idea. They want to make sure that everything stays separate. You know, just in case." Just in case. 3 little words that felt like a knife to the chest. Just in case we didn't work out. Just in case I turned out to be a gold digger. Just in case I was only marrying her for her family's money. Never mind that I had never asked her for a dime. Never mind that I paid for every date within my means. Never mind that I had turned down her offers to help with my student loans because I wanted to stand on my own 2 feet. None of that mattered. In her parents' eyes, and maybe in hers too, I was just a broke teacher looking for a come-up. I looked past her, toward the door of the bedroom. Her parents were standing there in the hallway, pretending not to watch, but clearly watching. Her father, Richard, had that smug look on his face, the one he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. He was a real estate developer, a man who had built his fortune by stepping on anyone who got in his way. He had never approved of me. From the moment Elena introduced us, he had looked at me like I was gum on the bottom of his expensive shoe. Her mother, Patricia, was standing next to him, her arms crossed, her thin lips pressed into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had the same look. They both had the same look. Like I was beneath them. Like I was nothing. They smirked. Actually smirked. As if they had already won some battle I didn't even know we were fighting. My blood ran hot. Every instinct in my body wanted to grab those papers and tear them into 1,000 pieces. I wanted to stand up and shout, to tell Elena that if she didn't trust me after 3 years together, then what was the point of getting married at all? I wanted to walk out that door and never look back. The anger burned in my chest, a fire that demanded to be fed. But I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I thought about my grandmother. My grandmother, who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12 years old. My grandmother, who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and never once complained. My grandmother, who used to sit me down every Sunday and tell me stories about our family's past. Stories about the business my great-grandfather built from nothing. Stories about the money that had been sitting in a trust fund, waiting for me to turn 30 years old. Stories about how wealth could either build a person up or tear them apart, depending on what was in their heart. My grandmother had died 6 months ago. It was the hardest loss I had ever experienced. She was my everything, my anchor, my guiding light. And in her final weeks, as the cancer ate away at her body, she had made me promise to keep our secret. The inheritance. The $100 million that would become mine exactly 2 months after my 30th birthday. 2 months after my wedding day. "Don't tell anyone," she had whispered, her paper-thin hand gripping mine with surprising strength. "Not even the woman you love. Especially not her. You need to know that people love you for you, Marcus. Not for what you have. Promise me." I promised. And so, when Elena slid that prenup across the bedsheets and said she was just protecting her family, I swallowed my anger and picked up a pen. I signed every page without reading a single word. I signed as her parents watched from the doorway, their smirks growing wider with each turn of the page. I signed as Elena let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. I signed as if the document meant nothing to me, as if I had nothing to lose. Because in that moment, I understood something they didn't. They thought they were protecting themselves from me. They thought they were ensuring that I couldn't take their precious money if the marriage fell apart. They thought they had all the power, all the leverage, all the control. But the truth was that in 2 months, I would have more money than Richard had ever dreamed of. $100 million. A fortune so large that it would make their wealth look like pocket change. And they had no idea. I handed the signed prenup back to Elena. She looked relieved, grateful even. She kissed my cheek and thanked me and told me she loved me. Her parents retreated to the guest room, probably to toast their victory with expensive scotch. And I lay back down in that bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, because the woman I loved had just shown me that her trust had limits. Anger, because her family had treated me like trash. And something else. Something that felt a lot like anticipation. The wedding was beautiful. I wish I could say that the prenup ruined everything, that I spent the ceremony seething with resentment and plotting my revenge. But that wouldn't be true. The truth is that when I saw Elena walking down the aisle in her white dress, her hair flowing in the breeze, her eyes locked on mine, I forgot about everything else. I forgot about the prenup. I forgot about her smirking parents. I forgot about the $100 million waiting for me in the future. All I saw was her. All I felt was love. All I wanted was to spend the rest of my life making her happy. The ceremony was held at her family's estate, a sprawling property in the hills overlooking the city. There were flowers everywhere, roses and lilies and orchids that must have cost a small fortune. A string quartet played classical music as guests filed into white wooden chairs arranged in neat rows. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that made Elena's veil dance like a living thing. Her father walked her down the aisle, his arms stiff and formal, his smile forced. But Elena was beaming. She was radiant. She was everything I had ever wanted. When we exchanged vows, I meant every word I said. I promised to love her, to cherish her, to stand by her side through all the trials and triumphs of life. I promised to be her partner, her protector, her best friend. I made those promises with my whole heart, without reservation, without calculation. I believed in us. I believed that love could overcome anything, even prenups and smirking in laws and the corrosive influence of money. Elena's vows were beautiful too. She spoke about the first time we met, about how she knew immediately that I was different. She spoke about my kindness, my patience, my unwavering integrity. She promised to love me for who I was, not for what I could give her. She promised to build a life with me, brick by brick, day by day. Her eyes glistened with tears as she spoke. My eyes glistened too. It was perfect. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. The reception was a blur of champagne toasts and dancing and cake that tasted like heaven. Elena's father gave a speech that was polite but distant, praising his daughter's choices without ever directly mentioning me. Her mother said nothing at all, just smiled that thin-lipped smile and clapped when everyone else clapped. I didn't care. I was too happy to care. I spent the evening with my new wife in my arms, spinning her around the dance floor, laughing with our friends, stealing kisses when no one was looking. We left for our honeymoon the next morning. A week in a small beach town in Mexico, far away from phones and emails and the expectations of other people. We swam in the ocean. We ate street tacos from carts that probably violated every health code in existence. We stayed up late talking about our future, about the children we wanted to have, about the house we wanted to buy, about the life we wanted to build together. It was the best week of my life. But when we returned home, reality set in. The first few months of marriage were harder than I expected. Not because of anything between Elena and me, but because of her family. Richard and Patricia had never liked me, but after the wedding, their contempt became more overt. They made snide comments about my job, about my salary, about my modest lifestyle. They questioned why I hadn't bought Elena a more expensive engagement ring. They wondered aloud why we were renting an apartment instead of buying a house. They asked Elena, in front of me, whether she was sure she had made the right choice. Elena defended me, at first. She told her parents to back off. She reminded them that she loved me, that I made her happy, that money wasn't everything. But over time, I could see the doubt creeping in. The way she looked at our apartment with something like disappointment. The way she sighed when I said we couldn't afford a vacation that year. The way she hesitated before introducing me to her wealthy friends, as if she was embarrassed by my old clothes and my practical car. The prenup sat on her mind like a ghost. I could feel it. She never mentioned it directly, but it was there, lurking beneath every conversation about money, every discussion about our future. It was the elephant in the room, the unspoken acknowledgement that she didn't fully trust me, that she had built a wall between us before we even said I do. I wanted to tell her the truth. Every day, I wanted to tell her. I wanted to sit her down and explain that I wasn't broke, that I was about to inherit more money than her family had ever seen, that the prenup she had forced me to sign was the biggest joke in the history of marriage contracts. I said nothing. I just looked at him, my face neutral, my hands resting calmly in my lap. I'm not saying this to be cruel, Richard continued, though his smirk suggested otherwise. I'm saying this to be clear. Elena comes from money. You do not. That's a fact. And we need to make sure that our daughter's financial future is secure, regardless of what happens with this marriage. Patricia nodded along, her thin lips pressed into that familiar smile. We've been generous, Richard and I. We paid for the wedding. We helped with the down payment on your apartment. We've done everything we can to support you both. But there have to be boundaries. Limits. Boundaries. I repeated, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. Yes, Patricia said. For example, we've decided that any children you have will be required to attend private school. We'll pay for it, of course, but we want to make sure that our grandchildren are raised properly, with the right values, the right connections. The right connections. What she meant was rich connections. White connections. Connections that didn't include people like me, people who had grown up with nothing and worked for everything they had. I looked at Elena. She was staring at the floor, her cheeks flushed, her hands twisting in her lap. She didn't defend me. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, letting her parents outline the terms of our future like we were employees and they were the board of directors. We also think you should consider a career change, Marcus, Richard said, leaning back in his chair. Teaching is noble work, I suppose, but it doesn't pay well. And Elena is accustomed to a certain lifestyle. We'd be willing to help you find something more lucrative, perhaps in my company. We could start you in a junior position, see how you handle it. A junior position. In his company. Working for the man who had spent 3 years treating me like dirt. The offer was so insulting, so transparently condescending, that I almost laughed out loud. Almost. Instead, I took a deep breath and smiled. I appreciate the offer, I said, my voice calm and steady. But I enjoy teaching. It's what I was meant to do. And I think Elena and I can figure out our own financial future. Thank you very much. Richard's smirk faltered for just a moment. He wasn't used to being told no. Suit yourself, he said, shuffling his papers back into the folder. But don't come crying to us when things get tight. You signed the prenup. You knew what you were getting into. We left shortly after that. The drive home was silent. Elena stared out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass, her jaw clenched tight. I wanted to reach over and hold her hand. I wanted to tell her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't, because I was still keeping my secret, and every day that secret grew heavier, harder to carry, harder to justify. That night, Elena and I had our first real fight. "Why didn't you say anything?" she demanded, pacing back and forth in our living room. "Why did you just sit there and let them talk to you like that?" "Because they're your parents," I said. "And I didn't want to make things worse." "Make things worse." She stopped pacing and turned to face me, her eyes flashing. "Marcus, they basically called you a failure. They offered you a pity job. They told us that our children would be raised according to their rules. And you just sat there and smiled. What was I supposed to do?" I asked, my voice rising despite my best efforts. Shout at them? Insult them back? Walk out in a huff? That would have just proven their point. That would have made me look exactly like the broke, angry, ungrateful person they already think I am. "So you'd rather let them walk all over you?" "I'd rather pick my battles." Elena shook her head, her frustration palpable. "You don't understand, Marcus. You don't understand what it's like to come from a family like mine. They're not going to stop. They're going to keep pushing and pushing until you either break or push back. And if you don't push back, they're going to take over our entire lives. Then maybe we should stop taking their money," I said. The words hung in the air between us, sharp and dangerous. "What did you say?" Elena asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Maybe we should stop taking their money," I repeated. "The wedding, the apartment, all of it. Maybe we should stand on our own 2 feet. Maybe then they wouldn't have anything to hold over us." Elena stared at me like I had suggested we move to Mars. "You want us to give up everything? The apartment? The lifestyle I'm used to? You want me to live like me?" I finished for her. "Like someone who doesn't have a rich family to fall back on." She didn't answer. She just turned away and walked into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the wall, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. My secret, my promise, my growing certainty that Elena's love came with conditions I couldn't meet. The next 10 days were awkward and strained. Elena and I went through the motions of marriage, eating meals together, sleeping in the same bed, but something was missing. The warmth had cooled. The easy laughter had faded. We were like actors in a play, reciting lines we no longer believed. I kept waiting for the right moment to tell her about the inheritance. But every time I opened my mouth, something held me back. Fear, maybe. Or pride. Or the stubborn need to know that she loved me for me, not for my money. My 30th birthday arrived on a Tuesday. I woke up that morning to an empty bed. Elena had already left for work. There was a card on the pillow, the kind you buy at the drugstore, with a generic message about another year older and another year wiser. She had signed it Love, Elena, but there was no personal note, no heartfelt message, nothing that felt like her. I read the card twice, looking for something that wasn't there, and then set it aside. I didn't tell her about the inheritance that morning. I didn't tell her when she came home from work, tired and distracted, complaining about her boss and her coworkers and the traffic on the freeway. I didn't tell her over dinner, a frozen pizza we ate in front of the television because neither of us had the energy to cook. I told myself I would tell her tomorrow, or the next day, or the next. But the lawyers called that afternoon. I was in my classroom, grading papers, when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. It was the law firm handling my grandmother's estate. The inheritance had cleared. The money was now officially mine. $100 million, transferred into accounts in my name, waiting for me to decide what to do with it. I sat in that empty classroom, surrounded by posters of historical figures and maps of the world, and I tried to process what had just happened. $100 million. It was a number so large that it barely seemed real. It was more money than I had ever imagined, more money than most people would see in 100 lifetimes. And it was mine. All mine. I should have felt happy. I should have felt excited. I should have wanted to call Elena immediately and share the news. But instead, I felt something else. Something cold and heavy and sad. Because I knew that once I told her, everything would change. The way she looked at me. The way her parents looked at me. The way our entire marriage functioned. Money had a way of corrupting things, of turning love into transaction, of revealing truths that were better left hidden. I decided to wait a little longer. Just a few more days. Just long enough to see how things played out without the money clouding the picture. The universe, as always, had other plans. 3 days after my birthday, Elena's parents invited us to dinner at their estate. They said it was a belated birthday celebration for me. I knew better. Richard and Patricia didn't celebrate birthdays. They strategized. They maneuvered. They used every social gathering as an opportunity to advance their agenda. But I went anyway, because Elena wanted me to, and because a small part of me wanted to see their faces when they eventually learned the truth. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a cavernous space with a chandelier that looked like it cost more than my annual salary. The table was set with fine china and crystal glasses and silverware that probably hadn't been used since the last time they had important guests. Patricia had hired a private chef to prepare a 5-course meal. Richard had opened a bottle of wine that cost more than my first car. They were putting on a show, as always, but the audience was just me and Elena. That should have been my first clue that something was wrong. The conversation started innocently enough. We talked about the weather, about politics, about a charity gala that Elena's mother was organizing. But after the second course, Richard set down his fork and fixed me with that familiar smirk. "So, Marcus," he said, his voice dripping with false friendliness. "Elena tells us you've been acting strange lately. Distant. Preoccupied. Anything you want to share with the family?" I glanced at Elena. She was studying her plate, her cheeks flushed, her fork moving food around without ever lifting it to her mouth. She had been talking to her parents about me, about our marriage, about things that should have stayed between us. "Nothing in particular," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just the usual end of semester stress. Grading papers, preparing exams, that sort of thing." Richard nodded slowly, as if he didn't believe me but was willing to play along. "I see. Well, if there's ever anything you want to discuss, anything at all, you know we're here for you. We're family now, after all." Family. The word felt wrong coming from his mouth. Family didn't force prenups on people the night before their wedding. Family didn't offer pity jobs and then hold them over your head. Family didn't treat you like an outsider for 3 years and then pretend to care when it was convenient. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that." Patricia cleared her throat, a small sound that commanded attention. "Marcus, there's something we've been meaning to ask you. And please don't take this the wrong way. It comes from a place of love." "A place of love?" I doubted that very much, but I nodded for her to continue. "Have you given any more thought to your career?" she asked, her thin lips curving into a smile. "Teaching is wonderful, of course. So noble. But Richard's offer still stands. A position at his company, with room to grow. It would mean so much to us to have you in the family business." The family business. As if I was being offered a place at the table instead of a scraps from the floor. I had seen how Richard treated his employees. Like tools. Like assets. Like things to be used and discarded when they were no longer useful. I would rather flip burgers for the rest of my life than work for that man. "I'm happy where I am," I said for the second time. "Teaching is my calling. I'm not going to abandon it for a paycheck." Richard's smirk hardened. "Even if that paycheck could give Elena the life she deserves? Even if it could provide for your future children? Even if it could rescue you from the mediocrity of your current existence?" Mediocrity. There it was. The word they had been dancing around for 3 years. They thought my life was mediocre. They thought I was mediocre. They thought I was a waste of their daughter's potential, an anchor dragging her down into a sea of ordinary. I set down my fork. The clink of metal against china echoed in the silent room. "You want to talk about mediocrity?" I said, my voice low and controlled. "You want to talk about providing for Elena and our future children? Fine. Let's talk." Elena looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. Richard leaned back in his chair, his smirk replaced by something more calculating. Patricia's thin lips pressed together even tighter. They could sense that something had shifted, that the balance of power was about to change. "You've spent 3 years treating me like I'm beneath you," I continued. "Like I'm some kind of charity case that Elena picked up off the street. You forced me to sign a prenup because you were afraid I might take your precious money. You've offered me pity jobs and backhanded compliments and veiled insults at every turn. And through all of it, I've smiled and nodded and thanked you for your generosity. But I'm done. I'm done pretending that your approval matters to me. I'm done pretending that your money impresses me. Because the truth is, Richard and Patricia, you have no idea who you're dealing with." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What is that supposed to mean?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment. The moment I had been waiting for, dreading, anticipating for months. The moment when everything would change. It means, I said, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my phone, that I inherited $100 million from my grandmother. It became mine 3 days ago. And unlike your money, which came from stepping on people and exploiting opportunities, my money came from generations of hard work and integrity. My great-grandfather built a business from nothing. My grandmother protected that business with her life. And now it's mine. All of it. The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face went pale, then red, then pale again. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Patricia's thin lips parted in genuine shock, the first real emotion I had ever seen on her face. And Elena just stared at me. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, her expression unreadable. 100 million. Richard finally managed, his voice hoarse. That's impossible. You're a teacher. You drive a Honda. You live in a rented apartment. There's no way. There's every way, I said, pulling up the account balance on my phone and sliding it across the table. See for yourself. Richard grabbed the phone like a starving man grabbing bread. He stared at the screen, his eyes moving back and forth, as if he was trying to find the trick, the lie, the trap. But there was no trick, no lie, no trap, just numbers. Beautiful, undeniable numbers. This can't be right, he muttered. This can't be. It's right, I said, taking my phone back. And here's the best part. The prenup you forced me to sign? It protects your assets from me. But it doesn't protect my assets from Elena. Because my assets weren't mentioned in the document. They didn't exist at the time. Which means that legally, everything I inherited is completely separate from the marriage. Elena has no claim to it. Your family has no claim to it. It's mine. All mine. Patricia let out a sound that was half gasp, half whimper. But you're married. What's yours is hers. That's how marriage works. Not when there's a prenup, I said, enjoying this more than I should have. Not when the prenup specifically states that all assets brought into the marriage remain separate. And since this inheritance came after the marriage, and since the prenup doesn't address it, it falls under default marital laws. Which, in this state, means it's mine alone unless I choose to share it. I hadn't actually consulted a lawyer about any of this. I was bluffing, at least partially. But from the horrified looks on Richard and Patricia's faces, they believed every word. And honestly, I was pretty sure I was right. The prenup they had been so smug about had just backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Elena still hadn't said a word. She was staring at me like she didn't recognize me, like I was a stranger wearing her husband's face. I wanted to reach out to her, to explain, to make her understand why I had kept this secret. But I couldn't. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I should have trusted you. I should have torn up that prenup and told my parents to mind their own business. But I was weak. I was scared. And now I've lost you. You haven't lost me, I said, reaching over and taking her hand. I'm still here. I'm still your husband. But things have to change, Elena. I can't live my life under your parents' thumb. And I can't be married to someone who lets them control everything. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice desperate. Tell me. I'll do anything. I want you to choose, I said. Choose me. Choose us. Choose the life we're building together, not the life your parents want for you. If you can do that, really do that, then we have a chance. But if you can't, if you're always going to prioritize their opinions over our marriage, then maybe we made a mistake. Elena squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. I choose you, she said. I should have chosen you from the beginning. I'm choosing you now. I'll always choose you. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was the turning point, that we would drive off into the sunset and live happily ever after. But I had learned too much about the power of family, about the grip that money and control could have on a person's soul. Changing would be hard for Elena, harder than she realized. And I wasn't sure if she had the strength to do it. When we got home, we stayed up talking until the sun rose. We talked about everything. Our hopes, our fears, our mistakes, the ways we had hurt each other without meaning to. It was the most honest conversation we had ever had, raw and painful and beautiful. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I felt closer to Elena than I had in months. Maybe closer than I had ever been. But the story doesn't end there. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Richard and Patricia, predictably, did not take the news well. They called constantly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to accusatory to desperate. They offered to tear up the prenup. They offered to give us money, as if I needed their money. They offered to apologize publicly, to welcome me into the family with open arms, to treat me like the son they had always wanted. It was sickening, watching them grovel. It confirmed everything I had always suspected about them. They didn't care about Elena's happiness. They didn't care about love or family or any of the things they claimed to value. They only cared about money. And now that I had more of it than they did, they wanted in. Elena struggled. She wanted to believe that her parents had changed, that the news of my inheritance had somehow transformed them into better people. But I could see the truth. The apologies were hollow. The offers were self-serving. The tears were fake. Her parents were sharks, and they smelled blood in the water. Maybe we should give them a chance, Elena said one night, as we lay in bed together. They're my parents, Marcus. I can't just cut them out of my life. I'm not asking you to cut them out, I said. I'm asking you to set boundaries, to stop letting them run our lives, to recognize that their love comes with conditions that we shouldn't have to meet. They're scared, Elena said. They're scared of losing me. Can you blame them? I could blame them. Of course I could blame them. They weren't scared of losing Elena. They were scared of losing access to my money. But I didn't say that. I had learned that some truths were too painful to speak out loud, at least not yet. Instead, I held Elena close and told her that we would figure it out together, that we would find a way forward, that as long as we had each other, we could survive anything. I wanted to believe that too. The breaking point came a month later. Richard called Elena while she was at work. He told her that he had been diagnosed with a serious heart condition. He told her that he might not have much time left. He told her that he wanted to make things right before he died, to reconcile with me, to be a real grandfather to the children we would someday have. Elena was devastated. She came home sobbing, convinced that her father was on the verge of death, desperate to fix their relationship before it was too late. I was skeptical. Richard had always been dramatic, always willing to use any tool at his disposal to get what he wanted. But I couldn't prove that he was lying. And even if I could, would it matter? Elena needed to believe that her father was capable of change. She needed to believe that their relationship could be saved. Who was I to take that away from her? So I agreed to meet with him. I agreed to hear him out. I agreed to give him one chance to prove that he was sincere. The meeting was held at his estate, in the same study where he had outlined the terms of our financial future. But this time, the atmosphere was different. Richard looked smaller somehow, diminished. His skin was pale. His hands trembled. His voice was soft and uncertain. He apologized for everything. The prenup, the insults, the pity job, the years of treating me like I was beneath him. He said he had been wrong. He said he respected me now. He said he wanted to be a better father-in-law, a better grandfather, a better man. I listened to his apology without interrupting. I watched his face for signs of deception, for the telltale flicker of insincerity. But he was good, really good. He had me almost convinced that he meant it. Almost. Thank you for saying that, Richard, I said when he was finished. I appreciate the apology, and I'm willing to move forward, to build a better relationship with you and Patricia. But there's something I need to know. Anything, he said, his eyes wide with sincerity. Are you really dying? The question hung in the air like a bombshell. Richard's face went through a series of micro-expressions, too fast to track, but impossible to miss. Shock, guilt, fear, calculation, and then, finally, resignation. No, he admitted, his voice barely audible. There's no heart condition. I made it up. I wanted Elena to feel sorry for me. I wanted to get you in this room so I could apologize. I thought it was the only way. Elena gasped. She had been standing in the doorway, listening to the conversation, her face a mask of hope and fear. When she heard her father's confession, that mask shattered. The hope died in her eyes. The fear turned to something worse. Betrayal. Pure, unadulterated betrayal. You lied to me? She whispered, stepping into the room. You made me believe you were dying? You made me cry for you? You made me beg Marcus to give you a chance? All of it was a lie. Richard's face crumpled. Elena, I'm sorry. I didn't know how else to. How else to what? She shouted, her voice rising. How else to manipulate us? How else to get your hands on Marcus's money? How else to worm your way back into my life after everything you've done? That's not fair, Patricia interjected, appearing from the hallway. Your father was trying to protect this family. He made a mistake, but his heart was in the right place. His heart. Elena laughed, a bitter, broken sound. His heart is in the same place it's always been. In his wallet. You're both pathetic. You're both so obsessed with money that you would say anything, do anything, lie about anything to get more of it. I'm done. I'm done with both of you. She turned and walked out of the study, out of the house, out of their lives. I followed her, leaving Richard and Patricia standing in that room with their lies and their greed and their shattered illusions. That was the last time Elena spoke to her parents for a long time. The months that followed were difficult but transformative. Elena started seeing a therapist to work through her childhood trauma and her complicated feelings about her family. I started seeing a financial advisor to figure out what to do with my inheritance. We moved out of the apartment her parents had helped us buy and found a modest house in a neighborhood we loved. I kept teaching because teaching was who I was, but I also started a scholarship fund for students who couldn't afford college. Elena quit her job at her father's company and found work at a nonprofit that helped domestic violence survivors. We were building a new life, a life that was truly ours, free from the shadow of her parents' influence. It wasn't easy. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when we both wondered if we had made a terrible mistake. But we kept going. We kept choosing each other. We kept believing that love was stronger than money, stronger than family, stronger than fear. And slowly, gradually, we started to heal. The prenup remained a sore spot between us for a long time. Elena asked me repeatedly if I wanted to tear it up, to start over, to build a marriage without that barrier between us. I always said no. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because the prenup had become something else to me. A reminder, a symbol, a promise that I would never again let anyone treat me like I was worthless. But on our first anniversary, I did something unexpected. I took the original prenup document, the one Elena had slid to me the night before our wedding, and I burned it in our backyard fire pit. Elena watched with tears streaming down her face as the pages curled and blackened and turned to ash. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Because I don't need it anymore," I said. "I don't need a piece of paper to protect me. I have you, and you have me, and that's enough." She threw her arms around me and held me so tight I could barely breathe. We stood there in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of smoke and the sound of crickets, and we both knew that we had made it. We had survived the worst that life could throw at us, and we were still standing. Richard and Patricia eventually came back into our lives, but on our terms. They went to therapy. They apologized without conditions. They worked hard to earn back Elena's trust and mine. It took years, and it was never perfect, but it was real. They learned to respect our boundaries, to accept that we didn't need their money, to love us for who we were rather than what we could give them. And that, I think, is the real lesson of this story. Money doesn't change people. It reveals them. It strips away the masks and the pretenses and shows you who someone really is. Elena's parents were revealed as greedy and manipulative, but they were also capable of growth. Elena was revealed as scared and uncertain, but she was also capable of courage. And I was revealed as someone who valued love over money, even when that love was tested in the hardest ways. I still teach high school history. I still drive a practical car. I still wear suits from discount stores. But now, when I walk into a room, I carry something with me that I didn't have before. Not the $100 million, though that's nice too, but confidence, self-respect, the knowledge that I am enough, exactly as I am, with or without the money. And Elena? Elena is still my wife, still my partner, still the woman I fell in love with in that coffee shop 3 years ago. She's not perfect. Neither am I. But we're perfect for each other in all our messy, complicated, beautiful imperfection. The prenup is gone. The secret is out. The money is just money. And love, real love, is the only thing that lasts. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and share if you want to hear more real-life dramas that will make you think, feel, and maybe even change the way you see the world. And remember, the next time someone tries to tell you that you're not enough, that you don't measure up, that you'll never be worthy of their love or respect, just smile. Because you might be sitting on a fortune they know nothing about. And even if you're not, you're still worthy. You've always been worthy. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise.